The laughter cut through the summer air like a knife. I stood by the grill at our family barbecue, holding a plate of half-eaten potato salad, while my brother held court in the center of the backyard. His voice carried over the chatter, loud and confident as always. Some people make smart choices with their money, he announced, waving his beer bottle for emphasis. They invest in real estate. They build equity. And then there's my sister, who throws thousands away every month on rent. Everyone turned to look at me. My uncle chuckled. My cousin nodded knowingly. Even my mother gave me that disappointed look I'd seen my whole life. My brother grinned, enjoying his moment. Must be nice living like a teenager forever, Erica. My face burned. My hands trembled slightly as I set down my plate. I forced myself to smile, to play along, to be the good sport everyone expected me to be. But inside, rage boiled. He wasn't finished. My brother took another sip of beer and continued his performance. I own a 4-bedroom house in the suburbs. 3 bathrooms, finished basement, 2-car garage. That's what adults do. They make grown-up decisions. He gestured toward me with his bottle. But Erica here? Still renting that little loft downtown like she's fresh out of college. How old are you now? 32. The group laughed again, softer this time but still stinging. My father clapped my brother on the shoulder, proud. At least one of my kids has their head on straight, he said. That comment hurt worse than anything my brother had said. I'd spent my entire life being compared to him, always coming up short in my parents' eyes. He was the golden child, the success story, the one they bragged about to friends. I was just Erica, the disappointment who couldn't get her life together. I excused myself quietly and walked into the house, letting the screen door close behind me. In the bathroom, I stared at my reflection in the mirror. My jaw was clenched so tight it ached. My eyes were red but dry. I refused to cry over this. In my head, I repeated the truth like a mantra. My brother mocked me for throwing money away on rent. He had no idea what was coming. He didn't know that I owned half the city, that every rent check I wrote was part of a cover story I'd carefully maintained for years, that his precious suburban house, the one he was so proud of, was mortgaged to the hilt while I owned 6 properties free and clear. I took a deep breath, steadied myself, and walked back outside. My brother was still holding court, still basking in the attention. I sat down at the picnic table and waited. Patience had always been my strength, and soon enough, he would learn exactly how patient I'd been. My name is Erica Lawson, and I've been the lesser sibling for as long as I can remember. Growing up, everything my brother did was celebrated. When he made the high school football team, my parents threw a party. When I made honor roll again, my mother glanced at my report card and said, "That's nice, dear." When he got into a decent state university, they bought him a car. When I got a full academic scholarship to a better school, they asked if I was sure I wanted to go so far away. The message was clear. His achievements mattered, mine were expected. As adults, nothing changed. My brother's wedding was a huge event, 200 guests, expensive venue. My father's tearful speech about how proud he was. When I got promoted at work, I mentioned it once at dinner and the conversation moved on within minutes. So I stopped trying to impress them. I stopped seeking approval. I focused on building something they couldn't see. When we were kids, the favoritism was impossible to ignore. I remembered sitting in the bleachers at my brother's football games every Friday night, freezing in the autumn cold, watching my parents cheer until their voices went hoarse. They painted their faces in school colors. They made signs with his jersey number. They invited relatives and friends to watch him play. Meanwhile, I was captain of the debate team. We went to state championships. We won awards. My parents came to exactly one debate meet. They left at halftime because it was boring. That same year, my brother got caught cheating on a math test. My parents defended him to the school, blamed the teacher, insisted he deserved a second chance. When I accidentally missed curfew by 15 minutes because the debate bus ran late, I was grounded for a month. The rules were different for him. They always had been. So I learned to stop expecting fairness and started building my own path. When I finished college, I moved to the city and rented a small loft in an older building downtown. It wasn't fancy, just one large room with exposed brick, a tiny kitchen, and a bathroom that needed updating. But it was mine, and more importantly, it was cheap. My parents visited once, looked around with barely concealed disappointment, and asked when I planned to buy something real. My brother, who still lived in their basement at the time, smirked. Why would she buy? She doesn't know how to handle money. I let them think that. Let them believe I was irresponsible, that I was wasting my salary on rent and frivolous things. The truth was, I lived incredibly modestly. I bought clothes from thrift stores. I cooked every meal at home. I drove a 15-year-old car. Every dollar I didn't need for essentials went into a savings account that nobody knew about. While my family thought I was struggling, I was planning. My first property purchase happened when I was 26. I'd saved aggressively for 3 years, working overtime whenever possible, taking on freelance projects, living like a college student long after graduation. I found a duplex in a neighborhood that was rough around the edges, but showed signs of improvement. The owner was desperate to sell, going through a divorce, needed cash fast. I made an offer below asking price, and to my shock, he accepted. I put 20% down, got a mortgage for the rest, and suddenly I was a landlord. I rented out both units and lived in my loft. The rental income covered the mortgage, taxes, and repairs with a little left over. My family never knew. When my brother bragged at Thanksgiving about his new job and car lease, I smiled and nodded. When my parents asked if I was ever going to settle down and buy a house, I shrugged noncommittally. Let them worry. I was building. The first year of property ownership was brutal. I learned everything the hard way. Toilets broke at 2 in the morning. Tenants called me crying about broken furnaces in January. I spent weekends patching drywall and painting walls. The bank had been skeptical about lending to a young single woman, making me jump through hoops for the loan. I proved them all wrong. I fixed problems quickly, kept good tenants happy, and saved every extra dollar. By the end of year 1, I had enough to make an offer on another property. This time it was a small single-family home that needed work. I renovated it myself. Well, with help from YouTube videos and a couple of hired contractors for the big stuff. I rented it out within 3 months. Now I had 2 properties generating income. My family still thought I was just scraping by, renting my loft, working my regular job. They had no idea what I was building in the shadows. My brother's wedding was the worst night of my life. The ceremony was beautiful. The reception excessive in a way that screamed, "Look how successful we are." During the toast, my brother stood up with his champagne glass and spoke about family, love, and building a future. Then he went off script. "I want to thank my parents for teaching me the value of hard work and smart investing," he said, his voice carrying across the ballroom. "Some people get it, some people don't. My sister's still out there renting like a teenager, but hey, we love her anyway." The room erupted in laughter. His groomsmen howled. His bride giggled into her hand. My parents smiled indulgently. I sat at my table, my face frozen in a smile that felt like it might crack, while 300 people laughed at me. When I got home that night, I sat in my loft and cried for the first time in years. Not because he was wrong, but because I'd let them make me feel small. The morning after the wedding, I woke up with a headache and a deep sense of doubt. I made coffee and sat on my couch, staring at the brick wall. Maybe my brother was right. Maybe I was wasting my life. Maybe I should have bought a house for myself, something to show off, something to make my family proud. Then my phone buzzed. A notification from my property management app, rent payment received. Then another, and another. By the time I finished my coffee, $6,000 in rent payments had hit my account from my 2 properties. That money would cover both mortgages, all expenses, and leave me with extra to invest. My brother's wedding had probably cost him $40,000 he didn't have if I knew him at all. He'd put it on credit cards to impress people. Meanwhile, my tenants were paying my mortgages for me. I closed my eyes and made a decision. Stop caring what they think. Just keep building. That moment became my turning point. I stopped checking my family's reactions to my life choices. I stopped feeling ashamed when my brother bragged about his house and cars. I stopped trying to explain myself to my parents. Instead, I focused entirely on growing my real estate portfolio. Let my brother laugh. Let my parents worry. Their opinions had no bearing on my balance sheet. His arrogance became fuel for my ambition. Every time he made a comment about my renting, I used that anger to push harder. I studied real estate investing obsessively. I read books, listened to podcasts, attended seminars. I learned about cash flow, cap rates, depreciation, and leverage. I networked with other investors, most of them older and more experienced than me. They shared strategies I'd never considered. Within 6 months, I was ready to scale up. Not just one property at a time, but bigger moves, smarter moves, the kind that would change everything. Over the next 3 years, my empire grew steadily but quietly. I sold one property at a significant profit and used the money to buy a fourplex. I refinanced another to pull out equity and purchased a small apartment building with 6 units. Each property was chosen carefully, good neighborhoods with growth potential, buildings that needed minor improvements I could handle myself. I reinvested every dollar. While my brother bought a boat he used twice a year, I bought rental properties. While my parents took expensive vacations, I painted apartments and replaced appliances. My lifestyle didn't change at all. I still drove my old car, still lived in my modest loft, still wore thrift store clothes. To anyone watching, I looked like I was barely scraping by. In reality, my net worth was climbing into the high 6 figures. The mortgage balances dropped while property values rose. I was building wealth the old-fashioned way. Slowly, steadily, and completely under the radar. The real breakthrough came when I met Vincent, a semi-retired investor in his 60s who owned commercial properties downtown. We met at a real estate networking event, and he took an interest in my story. "You're doing this smart," he told me over coffee. "Most young investors want to flash their success. You're staying humble and stacking chips. That's rare." Vincent became an unofficial mentor. He taught me things I'd never find in books: how to spot undervalued properties before they hit the market, how to negotiate with desperate sellers, how to use creative financing to acquire buildings with minimal cash. He introduced me to his network of contractors, property managers, and lenders. With his guidance, I learned to buy properties, improve them quickly, refinance to pull my money back out, and repeat the process. Within 18 months of meeting Vincent, I doubled my portfolio. I now own 12 rental units across the city. And still, nobody in my family had any idea. At a family dinner 2 years after my brother's wedding, he was still the center of attention. He'd recently gotten a promotion and was talking loudly about his increased salary, his company car, the equity building in his house. My mother beamed at him like he'd won the Nobel Prize. My father nodded approvingly, offering advice about investment strategies my brother would never follow. I sat quietly at the end of the table, eating my pasta, occasionally nodding when someone directed a question my way. "Still renting that same place downtown?" my aunt asked, voice dripping with pity. "Still there," I confirmed, taking a sip of water. My brother jumped in. "One day she'll figure it out. Can't rent forever, right, Erica?" He winked at his wife, who smiled sympathetically at me like I was a child who needed patience. I smiled back, hiding the smirk that wanted to break free. If only they knew what my monthly rent checks represented. My cover story, my invisibility cloak, my secret weapon. After dinner, my cousin pulled me aside in the kitchen while we were cleaning up. She lowered her voice, glancing toward the dining room where my brother was still holding court. "Can I tell you something?" she whispered. "Your brother's in trouble financially. He bought that house at the top of his budget, and with his new promotion came a car lease he can't really afford. He's stretched really thin." I kept my expression neutral, but inside, pieces clicked into place. That explained why he'd been so aggressive about showing off lately. He was overcompensating. His perfect life was mortgaged to the breaking point. One emergency, one job loss, one market downturn, and his carefully constructed image would collapse. Meanwhile, if I lost my job tomorrow, my rental income would cover all my expenses. I had options. I had security. I had real wealth, not the appearance of it. "Thanks for telling me," I said to my cousin. She squeezed my arm sympathetically, thinking she was sharing bad news. She had no idea she'd just made my day. 6 months later, I acquired my biggest property yet, a 12-unit apartment building in a rapidly gentrifying neighborhood. The building needed work, but the bones were solid and the location was perfect. I used a combination of cash from my portfolio and a commercial loan to close the deal. My property management company, which I'd formed the year before to handle my growing empire, took over operations immediately. I hired a full-time maintenance person, upgraded units between tenants, and raised rents to market rate. Within 4 months, the building was operating at full capacity and generating substantial monthly cash flow. This wasn't about surviving anymore. This was about thriving. I now own properties across the city, apartments, single-family homes, even a small duplex near the university that rented to students. My portfolio was worth over $2 million, with about $800,000 in equity after mortgages. And I still lived in that same modest loft, driving my old car, wearing my thrift store clothes. Invisible, powerful, patient. One afternoon, I sat in my lawyer's office reviewing documents. He'd helped me structure my properties under an LLC for liability protection and tax advantages. Now he was walking me through the paperwork for my most recent acquisition. He slid a stack of property deeds across the polished conference table. My name appeared on every single one, page after page of legal documents representing buildings scattered throughout the city. "You've built something impressive here," he said, leaning back in his chair. "Half the rental market in the downtown corridor, several properties in the emerging neighborhoods, commercial space near the business district. You essentially own half the city's rental infrastructure." I ran my fingers over the documents, feeling the weight of what I'd built. Years of sacrifice, planning, and patience had led to this moment. Outside these walls, my family still thought I was the failure. Inside this office, looking at these deeds, I knew the truth. I was the success story they'd never see coming. "Keep it quiet," I told my lawyer. "Nobody needs to know yet." 2 years after that barbecue humiliation, my family gathered again for the annual summer cookout. I arrived late, letting myself in through the side gate. My brother was already center stage, gesturing animatedly while a small crowd listened. "So I'm expanding the business," he announced, his voice full of pride. "We need more space, and I've been looking at commercial properties downtown. There's this perfect building on 4th Street, right in the heart of everything. Prime location." My parents clapped. My uncle whistled appreciatively. My brother basked in the attention, explaining his vision for the new office space, how it would transform his business, how it would position him for even greater success. I grabbed a soda from the cooler and sat down at a picnic table, listening carefully. 4th Street. I knew that building well. I'd bought it 8 months ago. It was one of my commercial properties, a beautiful 3-story building with retail on the ground floor and office space above. I sipped my soda and watched my brother describe the building in detail. The exposed brick interior, the large windows, the modern updates. He talked about meeting with the property owner's representative, negotiating lease terms, impressing potential investors by showing them the space. My heart pounded in my chest, but I kept my face perfectly calm. He had no idea he was describing my building. No idea he was trying to lease space from me. No idea that in a few days, when he walked into that meeting, he'd come face to face with the truth. I wanted to say something right then, to reveal the secret and watch his face change. But I didn't. This moment needed to be perfect. It needed to be in the right setting, with the right witnesses. So I sat there, playing the role they'd assigned me, the struggling younger sister who threw money away on rent. Let him enjoy this moment. His reckoning was coming soon enough. The following Monday, my phone rang at my office. My property manager was on the line. "I have someone interested in leasing the commercial space on 4th Street, she said. "A business expansion. They want to meet with the owner to finalize terms." I asked her for the name of the potential tenant. When she said it, my brother's company name, I had to put the phone on mute for a moment to catch my breath. This was really happening. "Set up a meeting for later this week," I told her, keeping my voice steady. "I'll handle this one personally." She sounded surprised. I usually let her manage all tenant relationships. "Are you sure?" I'm sure," I interrupted. "This is a special case. Schedule it for Thursday at 2 o'clock. I hung up and sat at my desk, staring at the city skyline through my office window. Thursday. In 3 days, my brother would walk into my office, ready to sign a lease, and discover that his little sister, the one who threw money away on rent, was actually his landlord. Thursday arrived. I dressed carefully that morning. A professional blazer, nice pants, subtle jewelry. I wanted to look successful, but not ostentatious. At 1:50, my assistant buzzed to tell me my 2 o'clock appointment had arrived early. Send them in at 2 exactly, I said. I took a deep breath and straightened the papers on my desk. The door opened at precisely 2 o'clock, and my brother walked in, confident as always, carrying a leather portfolio. He was talking to his business partner, not paying attention to who was behind the desk. This is going to be perfect for, he stopped mid-sentence. His eyes locked on me. The color drained from his face. You. The word came out strangled. His business partner looked confused, glancing between us. I stood up, extended my hand professionally, and smiled. Hello, I'm Erica Lawson, the property owner. Thank you for your interest in leasing the space. My brother just stood there, frozen, mouth slightly open, trying to process what he was seeing. I gestured to the chairs across from my desk. Please sit down. We have a lot to discuss. My brother's business partner sat immediately, still looking confused. My brother remained standing for another moment before slowly lowering himself into the chair. His face had gone from shock to anger to something like fear. I pulled out the lease agreement and slid it across the desk. The terms are standard for commercial space in this area, I explained calmly, as if this were any other business transaction. 5-year lease. First and last month's rent plus security deposit due at signing. Annual increases tied to market rate. My brother found his voice. You own this building? I met his eyes steadily. I own several buildings. This is one of them. He shook his head like he could make this reality disappear. But you rent. You throw money away on rent. You don't even own a house. I leaned back in my chair, completely composed. I rent one loft. I own 14 properties across the city. Would you like to see the portfolio? My brother tried to regain his footing. He looked at his business partner, then back at me, attempting to salvage his pride. This is a family matter. Surely we can work out some kind of special arrangement. A discount, maybe. Keep it in the family. I shook my head slowly. This is business. The lease terms are firm. If they don't work for you, there are 3 other companies interested in the space. That was a lie, but he didn't know that. The truth was, I didn't need his business. My building would lease eventually. But watching him squirm was satisfying in a way I'd never imagined. His partner spoke up, trying to smooth things over. The terms seem fair. Can we have some time to review everything? I nodded. Of course. Take the weekend. But I'll need an answer by Monday. The other interested parties are waiting. My brother's jaw clenched. He knew he was trapped. His business needed this space. He'd already told investors about it, shown them photos, built his expansion plans around it. Walking away would make him look weak. But signing meant paying me every single month. My brother signed the lease on Monday. He came alone this time, without his partner, and said nothing beyond what was legally necessary. His signature at the bottom of the contract looked angry. The pen pressed hard enough to nearly tear the paper. When he handed it back to me, his eyes were cold. Are you happy now? He asked. I looked up at him calmly. This isn't about happiness. It's about business. You'll receive invoices monthly. Payment is due on the 1st. He left without another word, the door closing harder than necessary behind him. I sat alone in my office, holding the signed lease, feeling a complex mix of emotions. Triumph, yes. Vindication, absolutely. But also something deeper, proof that I'd been right all along. That my quiet strategy had been the smartest play. That night, I drove through the city, past buildings I owned. The duplex where I'd started. The apartment complex that had been my first big leap. The commercial building my brother would now occupy. Writing checks to his little sister every month. I'd built this empire in secret, and now it was time to stop hiding. That weekend, I stood at the window of my loft, the same loft my family had mocked me for renting, looking out over the city skyline. From this vantage point, I could see at least 6 buildings I owned. The lights in the windows represented families living their lives, Small businesses running their operations, all of them contributing to the wealth I'd quietly accumulated. My phone rang. It was my mother calling to check in. I heard about what happened with your brother, she said, her voice uncertain. Why didn't you tell us about the properties? I thought about explaining, about the years of being overlooked, about the humiliation at the barbecue, about building something on my own terms. But I realized she wouldn't understand. None of them would. I didn't need you to know, I said simply. I was building something for myself, not for your approval. I hung up and smiled at my reflection in the window. My brother had mocked me for throwing money away on rent. He'd called me irresponsible, immature, a failure at adulting. But the truth was, I'd never been throwing money away. I'd been building an empire, one property at a time, while everyone laughed. And now, standing in my modest rented loft, looking out over half the city I owned, I finally allowed myself to feel it, not revenge, but something better. Validation, success, freedom. He went quiet when he discovered the truth. And I'd never been louder.